What do you do when you feel broken inside your marriage? When you're lonely and struggling and it doesn't seem like she even notices or cares? Welcome back to the Secure Husband Podcast. Bruce Abbott, certified professional coach and founder of SecureHusband.com, where I help good men stop reacting from pain and start leading with calm strength and truth. I've heard this explained to me in so many different ways with my coaching clients. I hear words like, I'm not okay. I feel like I'm losing it. I feel like I'm falling apart. I don't even recognize myself anymore. I feel like I'm just the roommate, the provider, the paycheck, the protector. I'm the one who keeps it all together for the kids. And behind closed doors, I feel broken. It's usually some variation of that with my guys. And no matter how hard I try, I just can't seem to make any progress. I'm stuck. It doesn't seem like anything's working. My wife doesn't notice. My wife doesn't care. Does that sound familiar? I know that's how I felt. I've walked in these shoes too. And we take it personally. We feel like it's our fault that we're broken, but it's not. So what do you do when you feel like roommates? Or worse, you feel like your wife is just critical all the time and you don't really feel like partners. Well, you have to use that pain to your advantage. You lean into it, and this is going to help you rebuild from the inside out. I just got off of a Zoom call with one of my clients, and he's probably late 30s, been married about 10 years. So we were on a Zoom, and he said something that really just struck me. I feel like a broken shell of a man. Wow, those are powerful words. So we talked about how things used to be different. It's a very common story that I hear with my men. Back when they were dating, his wife was warm, affectionate, playful. They had sex regularly. They couldn't keep their hands off of each other. They talked about everything. They felt so comfortable with each other. And somewhere along the way, it changed. Now they barely touch each other. Conversations are just transactional. Every word that he says, he feels is filtered through her irritation or silence. And so then he's tried everything. He's tried vacations. He tried counseling. He tried helping more with the kids, doing more chores, having deeper conversations. Nothing worked. He was so incredibly frustrated. But the worst part of it is, he said, she acts like I'm the problem, but inside I am already bleeding. He was getting worn down. He was tired of pretending. He was tired of being the strong one, trying to hold the family together. He's falling apart because he's hurt. He's lonely. He's disconnected. And as we worked through this, I asked him, what if this brokenness that you feel isn't a weakness, but it's a cry out for your own attention, your own self-love? And that was our starting point. And so we moved to the next step where we notice. We moved to that awareness step where we notice the pain without shaming ourselves for it. You don't shame for it because as men, we're conditioned to hide pain or fix it. But what if your pain isn't something to fix? What if it's something to feel? He spent years trying to fix the pain, trying to avoid the aching inside. And so he overworked, he overhelped, overexplained. He was trying to earn her love back. But the thing is, he didn't sit with himself. So as we worked through this, I asked him, okay, when the pain shows up, can you just sit with it? Don't try to fix it. Don't numb out or try to distract it. Just notice it. Again, not to shame yourself, but just to be aware. So he began to notice how he would feel things in his body. He noticed that when his wife walked into a room, he could actually feel his chest tighten. And he felt shamed, flooded with emotion over the slightest comment or feeling of rejection. And as we worked through this, he noticed that the message he was sending himself was, see, I did it again. And subconsciously, he's telling himself, I'm not enough, I never was, I never will be. Now, you don't consciously say that, but in your body, in your core, in your subconscious, that's what's happening. So when we bring that from the subconscious into the conscious, That's the first step. That's where healing begins. Because you can't lead yourself through something that you can't understand what you're feeling, that you can't admit that this is what's happening. But now you notice. You have this curiosity. And then once you notice, you make a choice. You choose to care about yourself like you would a wounded friend or a small child. See, most of the guys I work with are kind, they're generous, they're loving men, and they express this to everyone but themselves. So you beat yourself up, you minimize your needs, you put your wife's emotions above your well-being. So after a couple of weeks, as we worked through this, he said, if a friend came to me and said what I just said to you, I'd be furious on his behalf, but when it's me, I just suck it up. That's abandonment. You're abandoning yourself. That's not strength. That's a wound. You're hurt. You're not weak. You're not bad, but you are wounded. So here's what we did. I told him, okay, every day this week, treat yourself like someone that you are responsible for loving. So if you have a small child, treat yourself like you do that small child. Because most of the guys that I work with would do anything for their small child, and they treat them loving and they treat them caring, but they don't treat themselves like that. Start speaking to yourself with kindness. Start saying no to things that drain you. If you're constantly working to earn love, just let yourself rest without guilt. And you can honor your emotions without waiting for someone else to give you permission to. It will feel weird at first because you're so used to people pleasing. But if you practice this over time, you start feeling less broken. Because the first time in years, my client wasn't waiting on his wife to validate his pain. He started learning to validate it himself. And he did it with the deep work of meeting that part of him that got left behind a long time ago, that little boy inside. We all have him in there. For every one of us, it's a different story, but they're almost always similar. Maybe you were 5, 7, 10 years old. You can discover him through a visualization exercise. My client was telling me a story about how he was sitting in his bedroom and he would clench his fists to the point where his hands would become bright red while he would listen to his parents scream and yell at each other downstairs, that he could hear it even in his room with the door closed. See, he grew up in a house where his dad was emotionally absent and his mom would lash out in anger and then withdraw in guilt. So as a little boy, he learned that if I just do more, be more, stay small, maybe they'll stop yelling. Maybe I'll be safe. He felt like he had some sort of control, but he didn't. So now as a grown man, when his wife is cold or angry or distant, that little boy takes over. He's trying to fix everything. He wants to have control. He's desperately clinging to control. He apologizes for things that weren't his fault. So he worked harder, he talked softer, made himself small, walked on eggshells. Every single time he felt more broken. Not because he was broken, but because he was abandoning the part of himself that needed love. So we worked on this. So every time the pain came up and flared up, he would close his eyes and picture himself as a little boy. I encouraged him to find a moment where he could see himself as a little child. And if you can't do that, go find a picture of yourself as a little boy. But he would close his eyes, he'd picture himself, and he'd say, all right, little guy, I'm here. I've got you. You didn't do anything wrong. And he started to reparent himself. Slowly, the adult version of him began to take the lead again. And he connected to his divine guidance, his sense of higher power, whatever your belief system is. For him, he connected with God. And through repeated prayer and dialogue, he was able to understand unconditional love. That there was nothing he had to do to earn that love, and there was nothing that he was going to mess up, quote unquote, that would have that love pulled away from him. As he started to understand this idea of unconditional love, he started to practice unconditional love for himself. And that put him in a place where he was able to find the next loving aligned action. What was his next step? See, he was able to understand that his marriage was this system. It wasn't just this story about her, because it's easy to fall into the trap of blame. we're not excusing her behavior, but in my client's situation, his wife was emotionally dismissive, and she mocked his vulnerability. She refused counseling, but we leaned into that. And so every time that she pulled away, in the past, he chased and he explained and he pleaded, and that dynamic was keeping them both stuck. And as he progressed through the healing journey, he started to understand the truth that her withdrawal wasn't just her wound. His pursuit wasn't just his desperation, it was a system. Her fear of being overwhelmed met his fear of being abandoned. Her shutdown met his overfunctioning. Her silence triggered his shame, and then his shame triggered her defensiveness. So the two of them brought unhealthy inner space together, which created an unhealthy relationship space. So we stopped focusing on fixing her and started changing his role in the system. So we learned how to self-soothe, soothe the nervous system. That's an important step. And from there, when you're able to soothe your nervous system, you're not reacting out of emotion anymore. Instead of over-explaining, you can say less but mean more. You can speak truth without defending it. You can give space without collapsing and hold boundaries without blaming, but from love. Now, the great thing is in this situation, she didn't change overnight, but he did. He started immediately doing things different. And that changed the atmosphere at home. And they're making progress. It's still a long journey. This stuff takes time. And no, it's not 100% guaranteed that it's going to save your marriage, but it gives you a fighting chance. But the important thing is when you feel broken, you have to take radical responsibility for your emotional self. Take full ownership of what you feel, what you need, what you do. You stop playing the victim and saying, she makes me feel worthless. She doesn't care. This marriage is breaking me. Then you change that narrative because you start eliminating those false core beliefs. Because when you connect to that higher power, truth brings clarity and you start to see your false core beliefs. And so you start acting out of truth. You start saying, hey, I'm feeling worthless, but I'm not worthless. That's just my wound to heal. I'm feeling unseen. That's just my need to honor myself, my need to set a boundary. And when you do that, you stop giving your emotional power away. But you do that by learning how to regulate your nervous system. And you can set limits without blaming or raging. You express your needs without demanding them. You process the pain, you process the hurt without spiraling down. A great question to ask yourself is, what am I feeling right now? And what do I need from me? Not from her, not from your family, not from your kids, not from your job. What do I need from me? With self-love, self-compassion. That's self-responsibility. That's where you start to repair the broken pieces. And it's not because you're fixing yourself, it's because you're finally loving yourself. And you become the man who feels whole, even if she never notices it. This is where it gets real, because this is the part that is so hard. My client didn't know if his marriage would even survive. And honestly, he had to grieve the fantasy that this would magically return to what it once was. Go back to an earlier podcast on the honeymoon phase and the difference between responsive desire and spontaneous desire. But what he had to do was he had to lean into that grief that this was going to be different because he kept holding on to those early days. But relationships mature, but it takes both people working at it. So in that grief, he found freedom. And he found it when he stopped trying to be the man his wife wanted and started becoming the man he respected. Guess what often happens? When you start becoming the man that you respect, as opposed to the man you think your wife wants, oftentimes you become the man your wife wants. Clearer, stronger, calmer. You might still feel pain, but you don't feel powerless anymore. You can lean into that pain, and then you lead. You're able to lead your family. You're able to lead your marriage with peace and not anxiety. You're able to lead yourself. You're no longer shrinking around your wife. It takes time. She may not even fully see it, but you will feel it, and you'll feel whole again. And it's not because of anything that she has done, her approval. It's through your presence. You're present for yourself. And that's a wonderful feeling. I've been there. So have many of my guys. If you feel broken inside of your marriage, It's nothing to be ashamed of, because you're not broken. You're just wounded. And you don't need your wife to understand your pain in order to heal it. You just need to show up for yourself with truth and strength and compassion. That's where healing begins. I hope this podcast was helpful for you. Hey, if you're a regular listener, would you give me a review that helps other men find this podcast to heal? And share this podcast if you think someone might be able to use it. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. And if you need help getting unstuck, reach out to me at securehusband.com. Set up a free 30-minute consultation. No sales pitch, just a conversation. I'll see you again on the next Secure Husband podcast.